Chapter 15. Mathilde! Mathilde! A gentle hand shook my shoulder. We'll be arriving at your stop shortly. I've gotten your suitcase down for you. Here, put on your coat. The train attendant held my coat behind me as if I were young as Ty. I sleepily extended my arms to each side in turn. She pulled my braids out for me and tugged the coat closed in front of me. The drowsiness was hard to shake off. For the first time in weeks, I'd fallen asleep without being afraid. Trains and their tracks and stations were often bombed, as I'd seen earlier, but I hadn't worried about hearing sirens, about being jolted from my sleep. The train's movement had kept me feeling safe and sleepy, and my stomach was full for the first time since I could remember. I'd had my second meal with the soldiers and then eaten my glazed bun for dessert back in my compartment. Come, stand by the door. I followed her, carrying my suitcase. Out the window, the dark grass and trees racing by slowed, and suddenly a platform appeared. When the train stopped, the attendant opened the door, looked around, and nodded to me to exit. Goodbye, Mathilde. Goodbye. She was already latching the door shut. As the train pulled away, I waved at the windows where the soldiers slept, cards put away and dinners eaten. I looked up and down the dark platform. A light flickered. I covered my face with my arm as it flashed into my eyes. A figure walked toward me, a woman. When she reached me, she said, "Your papers, please." I handed over my papers with a steady hand, which she seemed to notice by the way her eyes and flashlight moved momentarily from my hand to my face, and she nodded her approval. She turned the flashlight to read my papers. Then she snapped the flashlight off, and my eyes adjusted to the starlit night. The woman started to walk down the platform, and I hurried to keep up, lugging my suitcase. "We have a bit of a carriage ride ahead of us," she said. "No car. You've got a cart and pony, but maybe—" "You like ponies?" I did like ponies. Did I? I didn't answer. I hadn't been expecting such a question. We came off the platform in steps, no station house here, but the creature attached to the waiting cart didn't look small enough to be a pony. I stood, gaping at him, until the woman said, "Let's go, or we'll have no sleep whatsoever tonight. Put your suitcase in the back and come sit with me up front." I hurried to do what she asked. Then I plopped down beside her. She told the giant pony to go with a shake of the reins. "I'm Miss Ibsen." "Yes, Miss Ibsen." We traveled on what seemed to be a dirt road through the woods. The darkness, the lull of the turning wheels, and the pony's clomping made me sleepy again. But there wasn't anywhere good to lean. I would either slump sideways onto Miss Ibsen or tumble out the open side of the cart. I yawned. "I know, it's awful, but we can't choose the train schedules, I'm afraid. We'll get you to bed soon enough. So, what are your interests, Mathilde?" "What?" The question surprised me, like the one about ponies. "I'll keep you awake by talking to you, unless you'd prefer to curl up in the back with your suitcase." Was that really an option, to curl up with my suitcase? "Oh, talking is fine." "In that case, what are your interests?" What were my interests? Was it just me being sleepy that made my brain sluggish? I guess what I like best is playing with my friend Megs. "Where do you play?" "In the woods outside the city." "You're from Lickalig?" "Yes." "Do you have brothers and sisters?" "Sisters," I said, a tight knot forming in my stomach. Not for thinking of them, but for having not thought of them until now. How had that happened? "I grew up in a town up north, not as large as your city, but not too small either." "And what do you do now?" I asked. Maybe it would be a clue as to what I was meant to do. "You'll find out in time," she laughed. "As far as you know, I'm sort of a midnight cart and pony chauffeur." No aerials disturbed our ride. The train must have traveled northwest, deeper into Sofer End, farther from the border. A large manor house rose up from the gloomy darkness, surrounded by a wall at least 1 story high. "Welcome to Phaetor," Miss Ibsen said. 2 soldiers stood at the gate. "Miss Ibsen," one greeted her. "Another one?" "Another one." "We need more?" the soldier teased. "We do." Won't we be full to bursting?" They were like the soldiers on the train, not at all serious. "Nonsense. There are still rooms to spare," she answered as they waved her through. If there were still rooms to spare, then why had the examiner been so insistent that she didn't want Megs to come? We don't like the security to look too tight, Miss Ibsen said. Not from the air, anyway. There are more soldiers here than just them. Don't worry. Was that a reason to worry? Or a reason to worry? Was that a reason not to worry? Or a reason to worry? Was this a known military base? A secret place? I thought of a safer question as we pulled alongside of the impressive building. How many rooms are there? 140. Really? Originally, this was the summer house of a baron, and then it was a boarding school. Now it's ours. We rode to the stables around the back. Another soldier handed me my suitcase as I hopped down from the cart and took over the pony. Come on, Miss Ibsen said to me. I followed her to the main entryway, which she opened with 3 different keys. She held the door open and I stepped inside, into the pitch dark. Miss Ibsen followed me inside, shut the door, and then rebolted all the locks. Then she lit a match and a candle from the hallway. Table. Best save my flashlight for when I'm outside. The tiny flame illuminated a large foyer with hallways and rooms leading off in several directions, and a grand staircase. The great windows to the front of the house had been covered with black curtains, so aerials can't see us at night, she explained, though we tend to have rather quiet nights around here. It's just a precaution. This way. She led me through the largest archway of the foyer. We walked toward a large, open living room, which also had black curtains over its 2-story windows, though it was brighter because of a lit electric light on the side table. The room contained clusters of comfortable chairs around both low and high tables, and all the tables were set with board games. Miss Ibsen paused in the doorway. A head of shoulder-length lit brown hair peeked over the back of one of the sofas. I followed Miss Ibsen around to the front of the sofa. A girl my age was sitting there. A navy, Miss Ibsen said. What are you doing up? I had an idea. She didn't look up from her board game. You couldn't think about it in your room? I needed the board. I stiffened. What was the punishment for being out of your room at night? Solve anything? Miss Ibsen asked, warm curiosity rather than sternness in her voice. A navy shook her head. Disappointment and slight frustration crossed her face, but not shame or fear. Try again in the morning. Maybe your mind will solve it in your sleep. A navy nodded, though she didn't seem sleepy. She stood, but kept her eyes on the board. She reached out and moved a couple pieces. Come upstairs with us. This is Mathilde. Hi, a navy said, though she didn't even look at me. She didn't seem at all surprised to see a new girl showing up at nearly dawn. The light, a navy switched off the electric light. We proceeded upstairs, and up some more stairs to the 3rd floor, and a corridor lined with doors. Good night, Anevi. I'll see you at breakfast. Anevi disappeared behind one of the doors. We're putting you just a few doors down, along here. Miss Ibsen opened another door on the opposite side. I stepped into the tiny room and looked around. I'd assumed I'd share sleeping quarters, if we slept inside at all, but there was a single unoccupied bed, a desk, a window with its own heavy black curtain, and several bookshelves full of books. Miss Ibsen snapped on the electric overhead light with a switch by the door. Always make sure your curtain is pulled before putting on your lights at night. I nodded. There's a washroom down the hall. I nodded again. Get some rest now. She left, shutting the door, but she didn't mention breakfast, or seeing me in the morning, or what to do if sirens sounded in the night. Her footsteps faded away, and it was too late to ask. I'd wake everyone up by calling or running after her, and she'd been so careful to be quiet. I left my door open and tiptoed to the washroom. I flipped the light switch and found 3 separate toilets behind their own doors, 3 bathing tubs behind pulled curtains, and 3 sinks along the wall. I went back to my room, turned out the lights, and lay down. What kind of job was this? What kind of place where you could get up in the middle of the night just to think about your board game and not get in trouble for being out of bed? I stared into the darkness. How could I ever get to sleep? No Cammy and Ty, softly breathing, occasionally turning over. They hadn't even given me other girls sleeping near me that I could imagine were my sisters. The night was eerily quiet. I got up and opened my suitcase to find my night clothes. Instead, I lifted out the handprints painting and hugged it to my chest.